Greetings, fellow Franklin County residents. This is Don Collins of Swanton, Vermont, and this is segment number 2 of Hard Work Never Killed Anyone. If you haven't seen the first segment, you may want to go back and look at some of the things to make the connections that I'm trying to make today. But if you never watch the first segment, you probably will still get the idea of my theme, which is working is good, it's healthy. And as Charlie McCarthy and Edgar Bergen were having a conversation, and Edgar said, spring is here and we have a lot of work to do inside and outside of our property. And Charlie McCarthy says, that sounds like a lot of hard work. And when he did that, Mr. Bergen said, Charlie, hard work never killed anybody. And Charlie replied, I do not want to be the first casualty. So I guess I never thought much about that when my dad said, particularly when we're on the farm, about hard work. I'd like to encourage the listeners to pick up their phone and call in to 782-8676 and share your ideas and come in and do a program. Franklin County has a lot to offer. There are a lot of good stories here. I know about 15 years ago I did one with Bill Doyle when he was in the Senate, and I was there as one of his colleagues, and we focused on Franklin County. Again, thank you to Josh and everybody here for giving me a second chance to extend my original conversation. Some of you, if you watch this one, as you watch this one today, but probably more so in the first one, I have tremors. This is a hereditary thing on my mom's side of the family. You get into your 70s, 80s. So far, they apparently haven't affected my mind. They haven't affected my body. I can be very physically active, but I know it can be a distraction. So bear with me. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about work. And I think that in the first session, I talked about starting with Christmas trees at age 5, moving up through to cutting the brush and helping my dad with the tree stumps and things as we cut thousands of Christmas trees every year. One of my favorite stories is St. Albans, Vermont, when I was 9 years old. I turned 9, and it was between my birthday and Thanksgiving. And my dad talked about, let's go to St. Albans, Vermont, which living in Lowell seemed like we were going to the big city. And we're going to go and park the truck and try to sell some trees. So we got into town, and my dad parked where we now is Taylor Park, probably always was Taylor Park. And we started out, and I took 3 trees, and I headed down Lake Street. And I sold a few. And then I got down into Elm Street. And by the way, I have to walk back up to the truck, which was on Main Street. And found a lady on Elm Street. And I showed her my trees and told her we had 3 sizes with us today, or more than 3, I guess, but anyway. And she ended up buying 3 trees. And why do I remember that? I remember that her bill, I believe, came to $1.50. But whatever it was, I got a nice tip. And I will never forget how hard I ran back to tell my father that I'd sold that group of 3 trees. Christmas trees are really big in our lives. Working in the woods very busy in our lives. Probably 1963 is a year I'll never forget, because that was the year that we had thousands of what we call pasture trees in bundles, mainly in Orleans County, but a few in Lamoille, and might have had a few up in Essex. I had been to all of those farms as a child and up in my teens when I worked there on weekends. But in 1963, I was finishing up my college to graduate in 64, and I'd spent, as they say, every spare moment working with my dad, and he had a heart attack. I'll never forget, he's in the hospital, and we have all these trees which need to come from the farms to be loaded on trucks to go to Newport to the freight yard. And once they got there, they had to be budded and loaded, tagged, and shipped. I had done a lot of the woods work, and I'd been with the trucker a few times, but I really didn't know the details My dad was the boss, and he was the one that did all the paperwork with my mom. My mom had also had some health issues that autumn, so it was tough. I was trying to finish up my student teaching in Newport and get home in November and take flashlights and car lights and go around to the farmers, talk with them about the trees, arrange with Mr. Benware, who had a milk truck, and after his milk route, he'd come and pick up trees. I think that's probably when I realized that if I was ever going to get killed by hard work, that would have been the time. But all of our trees got sent out. They were all shipped. The farmers got paid, and we got paid. And at that point, I think I decided that my future in Christmas trees would be at the local level, and my dad kind of wrapped it up. He did continue, though, for another 20 years, cutting Christmas trees with various other contractors who shipped them throughout the country, but mainly the East Coast. One time they did a segment on TV on Channel 3 across the fence and featured my dad showing how he started, where they tied trees in bundles with a special type of rope, the special kind of knot that he knew how to make that would hold tight even on the freight cars, and then showing the trees going through netting and all the transition. Also, Christmas trees were something that we tried to help local folks who didn't have a lot of money, and they could come and pick out a tree. Some of them were called the Charlie Brown trees, but they were good trees, and that was pretty important. Talking about trees, once we moved to the farm in '52, my dad said, we're going to have a schedule of working in the woods. My father had grown up in the Depression, got jobs in the mills. His father was worked in the mills, taking care of all the equipment, sharpening the saws, etc. And then there was my mother's father, who I was very close to, and he was a timber cruiser. Before I go back to talking about the woods, I want to just explain that if I ever had a job that I thought I didn't understand, it was going with my grandfather in the woods a few times, cruising through the woods and determining how many board feet we would have of birch, maple, any hardwood tree, and sometimes even poplar and some softwoods, but he mainly was hardwood. And that was quite an activity to take and gauge how many board feet would be there, and therefore the big companies that were buying timber would be able to go to the owner of the land and make them an offer. Also during that time, I learned how to scale logs. I don't know if I could do it today, but when I was 14, I know I did scale logs, and we had horses, and our cycle in the woods was kicking off with Christmas trees in the fall, and after Christmas, after January, we went into the woods and we cut logs and pulp. And that was hard work, but I loved it because I was around the horses. And horses are smart and had a lot of fun experiences. Did a few foolish things like ride the logs, and fortunately didn't break any legs. But after the season of working in the woods while the ground was frozen, spring came and we worked in the cedar. Cedar and poplar can peel fairly easy early in the spring. And so if you want to make fence posts or rails or whatever, that's a good time to do it, the best time to do it. And as far as poplar pulp was fairly inexpensive, but it was big, it grew fast, and so that kept us in the woods too. Probably, as I say, woods and Christmas trees provided me some of the most fun, but also some of the most work. Another career that I had, and I mentioned in my first segment, was working for Kraft Foods and United Farmers. And we did a lot of work, certainly packing cheese, boxing cheese up on the trucks, and taking it to the freight yards. But one of the things I remember, and since I was one of the youngest employees there, I got a chance to do things that nobody else wanted to do. But every year, and I think I did it 3 years, we had what they called the big cheese. And I don't know why they call it the big cheese, except it was big, but it went to the Big E. And if you've never been to the Big E, the big exposition in Springfield, Mass., it's worth a trip. I don't know if they still do the cheese, but we used to take cheese one night in the summer, usually late summer, and we would put all of the cheese that had been cut up in small pieces and packed real tight, and put into this big hoop. And my job was to climb up the ladder. I'm guessing the hoop was about 8 feet tall because I knew I could just about reach it if I jumped up, but I didn't do that. I used the ladder. But I could look and see that I could do it if I had to. And we had to dress the hoop with a cloth. And I remember the manager saying, now be very careful. We don't want any wrinkles because the wrinkles will show on the cheese. He wasn't too concerned about wrinkles on the bottom. I don't think he ever said much about the top because when we were done, that was nicely folded. But I had to make certain that at least half of what they call the dressing, the hoop dressing, didn't have any wrinkles. If it had wrinkles, they'd have to put it in a corner because they wanted people to think that this was, and it was, an A-plus cheese. I believe the cheese was left at least a year to cure. It didn't go directly from us to the Big E. I think it was a year later, and it even may have been 2 years later. And people could go there and see Kraft Foods cheese and get a little bite, and good publicity for them, but a nice support by a business to the big exposition. We've talked about the cheese factory, we've talked about farming, we've talked about working in the woods, did a lot in education, taught in elementary school, worked at Lamoille Union, as I said earlier, had 4 different jobs there. Worked throughout Lamoille County with students that went to what we called the vocational center at that time. Now we call them technical and career centers, and providing really great services. And I love that. In fact, in working some of the clubs at the vocational center, they did fundraisers to send their students to state competitions and national competitions. We had some young men and young women in Lamoille County who went off to nationals and competed very well. They were students from Lamoille, there were students from Hazen Union in Hardwick, students from People's Academy in Morrisville, Stowe, and I think we also had a few that came down from Craftsbury some years. So anyway, one of the fundraisers that we kind of kicked around was having some kind of sale. And I had worked with my uncle in the antique business, and I got my auctioneer's license. So I did some auctions to help him out, and brought the idea to the club advisors and some of the students, and oh my goodness, a lot of work, but a lot of fun. But to see these students working hard, getting stuff ready, getting stuff delivered when it was sold, running on the auction, and enjoying it, but working hard. And to my knowledge, they all survived. Actually, the auction company in Lamoille County, while I was there for the next 6 or 7 years, was pretty much fun, a lot of work, and discovered a lot of treasures. In education, after leaving Lamoille and going to Addison County, made some really great friends, and from there I worked in the Brattleboro area up in the West River Valley, and spent most of my administrative career at Fairfax and Georgia schools. At that time, it was called Franklin West, and I don't think the recent legislation had them merged, so they probably are called Franklin West, and they've added Fletcher. While at Fairfax in Georgia, I had the opportunity to work on a lot of construction projects throughout the state. At one time, I was told I'd done the oversight of more school construction projects in Vermont than any educator. I don't know if that's still true, but I tend to believe it is. Remodeling schools and building schools can be very challenging because many times a school district will build a school or remodel a school like once every 20 years. So you don't always keep up with the trends and also some of the challenges. But I was very lucky. I note in the first section I mentioned Jim Meanier, knew a lot about construction, big help. Also, another fellow who was really instrumental in Fairfax was a fellow by the name of Bill Orcutt. Then when we went over to Georgia, wonderful school board members. You can't have favorites as a superintendent, but two of the people that really I felt were not only hardworking and honest, but they were probably outstanding representatives of what Georgia is. And that was Alice Sturgeon and Colin Conger, just wonderful people. And there were a lot of others. And it gets a little dangerous when you start talking about people who've done good. That doesn't mean the other people did badly. It means these people just stood out. After working in education there and managing the construction projects throughout Lamoille and Chittenden and Franklin counties, I ended up in the Vermont Senate. And that was a wonderful experience. I enjoyed that a lot. I found that being in politics has more challenges than I would have expected. I enjoyed the camaraderie, the hard, honest work, and the challenges of things in politics that don't always appear to be on the up and up. Maybe that's just my interpretation. But I was very fortunate to get on the education committee the first year, ended up being the clerk. The second term, I was asked to chair the committee, which was certainly a nice honor, but that brought a lot of hard work. People wanted your ear after the session ended in the daytime. They wanted to catch you while you were trying to eat breakfast. They called you on the weekends. And it really, I found once I became a chairperson, that it was almost like 24/7. And that's a little exaggeration, but in the summer or on days off during the session on Mondays, always were quite busy. I created some of the busyness because I wanted to go out and meet people and hear from them. And other times people just wanted to bend my ear. I thought I was very fortunate to represent Franklin County and the community of Alberg up in the Grand Isle County. And also, even though Richford at that time was not in the district, I used to go to Richford, and I had calls come from Richford. Working with people across party lines was really important to me. I had grown up in a family where most of the time, most of my relatives, my parents, grandparents, probably voted Republican. I think my mom was probably about as independent as anybody as I ever knew when it came to politics. And when I was in the Senate, she really loved it because she could watch TV and tell me what was going on in the House of Representatives, and I was real busy in the Senate. But I can't say that everyone I worked with, I felt worked hard, but maybe their definition was different than mine. But one person I did admire, even though I was elected as a Democrat, was Jim Douglas. He worked hard. He worked hard being the governor, but he also worked hard getting out, meeting people, and listening to the people. I enjoyed working with him on some of the programs that were important to him. I'll never forget one summer day coming home, and Susan, my wife, came almost running out of the house saying, you have a phone call, you need to come in. And when I got there, she said, Governor Douglas called you and he wants to talk with you. He has a couple of ideas he wants to run by you. She thought that was pretty neat, and I guess I did too, but what Governor Douglas wanted to talk about was a scholarship program that he wanted to get going for high school students and to go to Vermont colleges. And I accepted his offer and challenge, and I worked with Senator Bill Doyle, and we did deliver. It took longer than I had hoped, and other people got in the way of it, but in the end, about 2 years, Governor Douglas did get some legislation through that we started, and that made me feel real good. I remember working with his staff on Building Bright Futures, which led to the early education pre-K we have now. In fact, I love it. I get emails from people telling me all of the things that they're doing and how much work they're doing, and I'm thinking, you don't have a clue how hard we had to work to put some of these things in place. Another program that I worked really hard on, because I thought it was very important, was something called high school completion, which I think now has been changed. But the idea behind it, the concept, was if a student could not function in the traditional school setting or had issues that kept them from being successful in school, they could go through adult basic education. I guess it's called adult education now, learning centers. But anyway, worked hard, and what I had found in my conversations with students who had left school before graduating, that they hoped to take and complete their education and receive a diploma from their local high school. Some pushback at that time from educators saying, well, that's not fair. Well, life is not fair, and these students work just as hard, maybe harder than some students at the local high schools. Kaki Hutchinson here in St. Albans probably helped me as much as anybody out in the field, getting me data, talking to other people. And in the end, we got what we wanted, and we got funding. I try to follow that program. Sometimes I'm a little disappointed that people who didn't understand the importance of keeping people educated, even if you don't keep them in school, have tried to tinker with that program. Another one was that CCV. I happened to be involved very early on when I was at Lamoille Union in the 70s in advisory committee that set up CCV, and I talked for CCV and tried to garner more and more support for them and their students. Also very much involved in making certain that students at high schools and career centers could take college courses in high school at very minimal cost to either the school or them, and could leave high school with a number of credits. I don't know if anybody ever earned a whole semester, but you certainly could get a very good start on your first year of college. So that kind of wrapped up my education career and my time in the Senate. And so then I spent a lot of my time back in the antique business. I call it treasures and junk, Junque. I have places in Swanton. I have a shop in Swanton, and I have storage barns in Swanton. And I do it year-round, probably more from May to October, but do that and then do appraisals for people, done some really big estate sales for people, most of them out of state, 3, 4, I think right in Swanton, but many of them are out of state where I go in with the team of people that work with me, and we advertise and sell all the items. And it is amazing some of the things that we have found in old barns and attics and sheds. That takes time, but it's fun. When I'm climbing around on a ladder up in a 3-story barn, I'm wondering, why am I doing this? In fact, just past month, I could get up in a barn and go up the stairs, no railings. You had to grab a big inch rope and walk up holding on that rope so that you didn't fall back down the stairs. But again, as I say, it's somewhere between hard work and enjoyment. Probably the thing that is taking most of my time right now is being on a school board. I, throughout my career, had served on the State School Boards Association, the VSBA. In fact, I was vice president one time and realized that going to Montpelier fairly often during a legislative session even though I wasn't in the legislature, I was now doing some lobbying, was more than I really wanted to do. And so when I finished my term at VSBA, I convinced a gentleman over in the islands to go on the state board. And recently I encouraged Jack McCarthy, former superintendent up in the Swanton area, now on the school board here at St. Albans City Town in Fairfield, Maple Run, to take and go to the VSBA as a representative. And I mention that because it's really important that school boards be heard. I respect superintendents, I respect business managers and principals and all the people who do the fine work and the hard and challenging work that teachers do. But school boards have to step up and make sure they're representing their communities and striking a balance between what we need to give every child a fair opportunity and balance it with the taxpayers. I think over the years that I've been involved in education, we've lost most of our local control, which I think is very fortunate. I remember back in the 70s and some in the 60s, working with people who worked in the factories, worked on farms, ran insurance agencies and various other small businesses, and they knew what their community could handle for taxes, and they also understood what was needed for their youth. We still try to do that, but the state more and more, I see, gets in the way, and that's my term, gets in the way. Some of the legislators now probably violently disagree with me, but we really need to make certain that we look for efficiencies and we look for opportunities for our students, and that we make certain that we don't overlook the importance of hard work. And I've been very pleased that in recent years we've returned to a philosophy that I learned in the late 60s at Memorial Union at our vocational center, that not everybody has to have a college degree. In fact, some people who have college degrees and gained a big debt probably would have been much better ready for adulthood if they had picked up a trade. And so now I'm seeing more and more people saying, oh, we need people to go and be plumbers and electricians and HVAC and contractors and people to work on automobiles and make food, and just goes on and on and on, and computers repairs. And I'm thinking, yes, but seems like the pendulum has to swing too far before common sense brings us back to what we really need to be doing, and that's looking at the big picture. Earlier, I had mentioned working with clubs and organizations in Lamoille. Let me tell you that still goes on. At MVU, we have not one of the best, we have the best ag program in the state of Vermont. Our students go to nationals through FFA. They get acknowledgments, they meet new friends, and they learn that there's a big world out there, and that even though you may live in a small town and in a small state, you can compete with the best and be successful. So in closing, I would say I really appreciate all the support I've had over the years. I'm running for re-election to the school board. This will be year 21, 22, and 23 if I'm elected. And I certainly support everybody who has supported our school district, but the people who have supported me as I've tried to do hard work throughout my careers. So Charlie McCarthy, you weren't the first casualty, and I don't want to be the first casualty, but I would tell everybody listening to this, if you have a story to tell, it won't be too hard to call 782-8676 and say, I'd like to go in and tell my story. Thank you for listening. Have a good year.